The impact came without warning. One moment I was driving down the coastal highway and the next, metal crumpling, glass shattering and my world spinning out of control. The steering wheel locked. The brakes failed. I remember my hands gripping the wheel uselessly as my car smashed through the guardrail. They say your life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die. Mine didn't. There was only the sickening sensation of falling, the blue sky and ocean trading places in my vision, and then darkness. Beep, beep, beep. The steady rhythm of a heart monitor pulled me back to consciousness. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but I managed to force them open. White ceiling. Fluorescent lights. Hospital. He's awake, a female voice said. Not Isabella's. A nurse probably. Footsteps approached, and a middle-aged doctor with salt and pepper hair leaned over me. Mr. Petrov? Can you hear me? I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. I nodded instead. You've been in a serious accident. Your car went off the cliff road. It's a miracle you survived. He checked my pupils with a penlight. Do you remember what happened? Fragments came back to me. The steering wheel fighting against my hands. The brakes, dead beneath my foot. Something wrong with the car, I managed to croak. Don't strain yourself, the doctor said. You've been through extensive surgery. Your heart actually stopped for 3 minutes on the table. I died. The thought was strangely distant, abstract. I died and came back. Isabella? I asked. Your wife has been here every day. I'll let her know you're conscious. Later, I'm not sure how much later, Isabella appeared at my bedside. Beautiful as always, her dark hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. But something felt wrong. She touched my hand, but her eyes darted away each time I tried to meet her gaze. The doctors say you're going to be okay, she said, her voice tight. You just need time to heal. What happened to the car? I asked. A flicker of something crossed her face. Tension, fear? They're investigating. Some kind of mechanical failure. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at it. I need to take this. Rest okay? She stepped outside my room but left the door slightly ajar. From my bed, I could see her silhouette through the frosted glass, could hear the murmur of her voice. I drifted in and out of consciousness. My mother-in-law, Patricia, visited the next day, her usual imperious self. Isabella is exhausted, poor thing, she said, straightening my blankets with unnecessary force. You should see how this has affected her. I nearly died, I pointed out. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Yes, terrible business. But life must go on. Have you checked your insurance policies? The company documents? Isabella needs to know what to expect if things had gone differently. The question struck me as odd, but my mind was still foggy from painkillers. That night, I awoke to whispers. Isabella stood in the corner of my darkened room, her back to me, phone pressed to her ear. The accident didn't kill him, she said softly. We need to move faster. My blood turned to ice. I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. I know what's at stake, she continued. I'll check the insurance papers tomorrow. Yes, I understand. He suspects nothing. After she left, I lay awake until dawn, my mind racing despite the drugs. Was it possible? Could Isabella, my wife of 5 years, have wanted me dead? A new nurse came on shift the next morning. Sophia, according to her name badge. Something about her seemed different from the others. More observant, more careful. Your wife left these for you, Sophia said, placing a bag of toiletries on the side table. Her eyes met mine and I saw something there. Concern? Suspicion? When Isabella didn't visit that afternoon, Sophia returned to my room, checking that no one was in the hallway before closing the door. Mr. Petrov, she said quietly, there's something you should see. She pulled out a tablet and played security footage from the hospital corridor. There was Isabella and with her, Travis Carter, my business partner. They weren't just talking. They were embracing, kissing passionately against the wall. I'm sorry, Sophia said. But there's more. The mechanic who examined your car the day you were brought in, he found evidence of tampering with the brake lines. He took photos, filed an initial report. The next day he disappeared. The official investigation found nothing wrong. I stared at the tablet, at the image of my wife in the arms of my partner, and something cold and hard formed in my chest. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Sophia's eyes were steady. Because someone tried to kill you, Mr. Petrov. And I don't think they've given up. 3 weeks after the accident, I stepped through the front door of our home with a cane in one hand and suspicion burning in my chest. Isabella hovered nearby, the concerned wife performing her role perfectly. "Are you sure you're ready to be home?" she asked, her hand lightly touching my arm. I noticed how she withdrew it quickly, like my skin burned her fingers. "The doctors cleared me," I said. "Besides, I miss my own bed." Our bedroom, once a sanctuary of intimacy, now felt like enemy territory. That night, I lay awake listening to Isabella's breathing beside me, remembering her words in the hospital. "The accident didn't kill him. We need to move faster." The next morning, after Isabella left for her yoga class, punctual as always on Tuesdays, I made my way to her home office. My fingers trembled slightly as I installed the monitoring software Sophia had given me. Not from guilt, but from the strange calm that comes with certainty. Like a man diagnosed with a terminal disease, I now knew exactly what I faced. I called Dominic Langford, my attorney and oldest friend. We'd been roommates in college before building our careers in parallel. Me in medical technology, him in corporate law. "Nick, thank God," he said when he answered. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Isabella said you weren't taking calls." "That's because she never gave me your messages," I replied. "I need to see you. Today. And don't let anyone know, especially not Isabella or Travis." Dominic arrived an hour later, his normally immaculate suit rumpled, concern etched on his face. I led him to my study and closed the door. "I think my wife tried to kill me," I said without preamble. To his credit, Dominic didn't laugh or suggest I was suffering from post-traumatic delusions. He listened as I laid out everything: the failed brakes, the overheard phone conversation, the security footage Sophia had shown me. "We need proof," he said finally. "Real, admissible evidence." "That's why I called you," I replied. "I've installed monitoring software on Isabella's devices. If there's something to find, we'll find it." Dominic frowned. "That might not be admissible in court." "I'm not thinking about court yet," I said. "First, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with." It took 3 days before we had our first breakthrough. Messages began flooding into the secure server I'd set up, hundreds of them dating back 3 years. All encrypted. "I know someone who can help with this," Dominic said. "Alex Mercer. Former NSA, now works freelance. Completely discreet." Alex turned out to be a woman in her 30s with electric blue hair and a sardonic smile. She took one look at the encrypted data and whistled. "Military-grade encryption," she said. "Your wife and her boyfriend weren't taking any chances." It took Alex 2 days to break through. What we found turned my stomach. "I can't wait until he's gone," Isabella had written 3 months before my accident. "We'll have everything, the company, the patents, all of it." "Patience, darling," Travis had replied. "These things need to look natural. The new break line modification is untraceable." I scrolled through years of betrayal, my hands growing numb on the keyboard. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been systematically planning my murder and the theft of everything I'd built. "Look at this," Alex said, pointing to a file attachment. "She's been forging your signature." The document on screen was a transfer of intellectual property rights, specifically, my newest medical technology patent, to Travis's name. The signature looked remarkably like mine. Sophia called that evening. "I found him," she said. "The mechanic who first examined your car. He's hiding in a motel outside the city. He's scared, but he kept copies of his initial examination." "Why is he helping us?" I asked. "Because he's afraid he'll be next," Sophia replied. "They paid him to tamper with your brakes, but he didn't know they intended to kill you. When he realized and tried to back out, they threatened his family." That night, I discovered a bank transfer from Isabella's personal account to the mechanic. $50,000, dated 3 days before my accident. The most devastating discovery came when I found emails between Isabella and my mother-in-law, Patricia. "He's still grieving over the baby," Isabella had written. "It makes him so easy to manipulate." Patricia's response chilled me to the bone. "Use his grief. Once he's gone, the company's shares will transfer to you, and we can proceed with Travis's plan." They had weaponized our most painful moment, the miscarriage 2 years ago that had nearly broken me, using my grief as cover for their betrayal. All while Isabella was already in Travis's bed. I closed the laptop and stared out the window at the gathering darkness. Dominic placed a hand on my shoulder. "What now?" he asked. "Now," I said, feeling a cold resolve crystallize within me, "we plan the perfect revenge." Dominic nodded. "Your Swiss account is still active. No one knows about it except us." "Good," I replied. "We'll need those funds. This won't be just about revenge, Dom. I'm going to destroy them so completely that they'll wish I had simply killed them instead." The best place to hide is in plain sight, I told Dominic as we sat in my study 1 month after my return home. They expect me to be broken. So I'll give them exactly what they want. The transformation began subtly. I started keeping a bottle of whiskey in my desk drawer. During business meetings, I'd let my attention wander, my words slur slightly. I'd flinch at sudden noises, a dropped pen, a slammed door, then laugh it off as accident nerves. Isabella noticed, of course. I caught the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes when I declined to review quarterly reports, the small smile she tried to hide when I canceled an investor meeting because I wasn't feeling up to it. "I'm worried about you," she said one evening, her hand on my shoulder, her eyes studying my face with practiced concern. "Maybe you should see someone. A therapist." "I'm fine," I replied, taking another sip of whiskey. "Just need time." Behind this carefully constructed facade of weakness, Dominic and I were building something new. In his office, after hours with the blinds drawn and phones left outside, we created Phoenix Med, a new company registered through a complex web of proxies and shell corporations. "They won't be able to trace it back to you," Dominic assured me. "But when the time comes, we can prove ownership." My Swiss account, opened years ago when I sold my first invention, provided the seed money. €2 million, untouched for nearly a decade, now funding my resurrection. "We need real investors," I told Dominic. "People who understand the potential of the technology and have the capital to help us scale quickly." "I've arranged meetings with 3 venture capital firms," he replied. "All outside our usual circles. All with solid reputations and clean histories." Sophia proved to be far more than just a compassionate nurse. Over coffee in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe, she revealed her background. 8 years military intelligence before nursing school, she said, stirring her cappuccino. "I left because I wanted to help people directly, not from behind a computer screen." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. She looked up, her eyes sharp and clear. "Because what they did to you is wrong. And because your medical technology could save thousands of lives." Sophia agreed to play a crucial role in our plan, approaching Patricia as a novice investor interested in biomedical technology. "Your mother-in-law loves to feel important," I explained. "She'll jump at the chance to mentor a younger woman, especially one with money to invest." Meanwhile, I began laying traps at the company. Carefully crafted false information, strategically placed for Travis to find. The centerpiece, documentation suggesting a critical flaw in our newest project. One that would make the product dangerous if released. Travis took the bait with embarrassing eagerness. I watched through the spyware as he downloaded the files, his cursor hovering over the damning sections. 2 days later he invited me to lunch. "Nicholas," he said, all false sympathy and concern, "I've been thinking about your situation. The accident, the recovery, it's a lot for anyone to handle." I stared into my untouched glass of water, playing my part. "Some days are harder than others. Have you considered stepping back? Taking some time away from the company?" I looked up, feigning surprise. "You mean, resign?" "Not resign," he said quickly. "Sell your shares. To me. I'd make sure you're fairly compensated." The offer, when it came, was 30% below market value. "I'll think about it," I mumbled, allowing a flicker of desperation to cross my face. That evening, I contacted Larissa Volkov, an investigative journalist known for exposing corruption in the medical industry. We arranged to meet at a small restaurant well away from my usual haunts. Larissa was younger than I expected, but her eyes held the sharp, assessing look of someone who had seen behind too many closed doors. "Why me?" she asked after I outlined what I knew, without revealing my full plan. "Because you care about the truth," I replied. "And because when this story breaks, I want someone trustworthy telling it." It was on my way home from meeting Larissa that I first noticed him, a tall man in an expensive suit, watching me from across the street. Not trying particularly hard to hide, which meant either amateur or supremely confident. I had Alex run facial recognition through her databases. The result came back the next day. "Victor Crane," she said, sliding a file across my desk. "Billionaire investor. Specializes in medical and pharmaceutical ventures. Known for aggressive takeovers and flexible ethics." "Why would he be watching me?" I asked. "Your technology," Sophia suggested. "It's revolutionary. People like Crane don't miss opportunities like that." What I didn't know then was how deeply Victor Crane would become entangled in my revenge, or how dangerous he would prove to be. "I'll accept your offer," I told Travis 3 days later in his office. His surprise quickly morphed into barely concealed triumph. "With one condition." Travis leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled like a cartoon villain. Name it. I want to present my project to the board and key investors before I go. One last time. I let my voice crack slightly. Call it professional pride. The flash of annoyance in his eyes was worth every moment of my performance. Travis had expected me to slink away quietly, broken and defeated. Of course, he said finally. We can arrange that. Say, next Friday? Give you time to prepare your farewell. He couldn't quite hide his smirk. Perfect, I replied, looking appropriately defeated. When I relayed this conversation to Dominic that evening, he nodded approvingly. The trap is set. Now we wait. But waiting wasn't part of the plan. While Travis believed I was preparing a pathetic goodbye speech, we accelerated our counterattack. Sophia had been cultivating her relationship with Patricia, playing the eager student to my mother-in-law's self-important mentor. Over champagne at an exclusive spa, Patricia had become remarkably forthcoming. You won't believe what she told me, Sophia reported, her eyes wide. The mechanic who tampered with your brakes, she implied he's been taken care of. Her exact words were, loose ends need to be tied up permanently. I felt the blood drain from my face. You think they killed him? I'm not sure, Sophia admitted. But I'm working on finding out. The mechanic I spoke to earlier might have been a different one, or Patricia might be bluffing. Either way, they're serious about covering their tracks. Dominic arrived an hour later with more disturbing news. I found financial irregularities in the company accounts, he said, spreading printouts across my dining table. Large sums diverted to offshore accounts, listed as consulting fees to companies that don't exist. I examined the documents. How much? Over $2 million in the past year alone. They're not just trying to kill me, I said slowly. They're looting the company. Deeper investigation revealed something even more sinister. Funds had been used to bribe officials and falsify clinical trial results. My technology, designed to save lives, had been corrupted by their greed. The meeting with Victor Crane happened unexpectedly. I was leaving Dominic's office when a sleek black car pulled alongside me. The window lowered to reveal the man I'd seen watching me. Mr. Petrov, he said smoothly. I believe we have matters to discuss. Please join me. Against my better judgment, I got in. The car circled the block while Crane introduced himself. I know about the attempt on your life, he said without preamble. And about your wife's betrayal. I kept my face carefully neutral. How? I make it my business to know things, Crane replied. Especially when they concern innovations as valuable as yours. He offered protection and partnership. His influence and resources in exchange for a stake in my technology. I detest corruption, he said. Men like Travis Carter taint our industry. Something in his speech felt rehearsed, his concern too polished. I thanked him and promised to consider his offer, while mentally adding him to the list of people I couldn't trust. He's playing an angle, Dominic said when I recounted the meeting. The question is, what does he really want? Alex's investigation uncovered Crane's extensive ties to the pharmaceutical industry, particularly companies that would lose billions if my technology succeeded. Test him, Dominic suggested. Give him incomplete data. See what he does with it. I arranged another meeting with Crane, bringing deliberately flawed technical specifications. He accepted them eagerly, promising to help expose Travis and Isabella's machinations. Meanwhile, Alex monitored his communications, tracking what happened to the information I'd given him. The day before the presentation, I planted one final piece of bait. A fabricated document on Travis's computer, detailed enough to be believable, damning enough to be tempting. It falsely implicated Travis in manipulating clinical trial data, evidence that could destroy him if revealed. Through our monitoring software, I watched him discover it, saw his panic as he read through it, and then, most tellingly, his decision to hide it rather than confront me. He believed he had found my insurance policy and chose to ignore it, confident in his victory. That same evening, Isabella booked a luxury getaway for herself and Travis, scheduled to depart the day after the presentation. First-class tickets to the Maldives, an exclusive villa over crystal waters. A celebration of their impending triumph. But the most revealing discovery came just hours before the presentation. Isabella had opened a bank account in the Cayman Islands, in her name only. No provision for Travis. No shared access. Even her co-conspirator was merely a stepping stone in her ambition. The morning of the presentation, I stood before my closet, selecting my armor for the day. Not my usual power suit, but something more subdued, the attire of a man who had accepted defeat. It's time, I whispered to myself, straightening my tie. Let the show begin. The conference room buzzed with conversations as I entered through the side door. Every seat was filled, board members in the reserved front section, major investors behind them, and a scattering of financial journalists along the back wall. Exactly as planned. Travis stood at the podium, resplendent in his custom Italian suit, gesturing expansively as he outlined his vision for the company's future. My company's future. Isabella and Patricia sat in the front row, both wearing satisfied smiles. My wife wore the blue dress I had given her for our anniversary, a detail that made something twist painfully in my chest. I caught Larissa's eye from her position by the wall. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod. Her phone was ready, live stream prepared. Dominic sat near the exit, his expression professionally neutral. Sophia had positioned herself near the audiovisual controls. And so, Travis concluded with practiced sincerity, we stand at the threshold of a new era in medical technology. Our latest innovations will not only transform treatment protocols but generate unprecedented returns for our investors. His gaze swept the room triumphantly. And now, Nicholas Petrov would like to say a few words before his departure. The polite applause felt like the drumroll before an execution. Travis's palm landed heavily on my shoulder as we passed each other, a gesture that appeared supportive to observers but conveyed his victory. I approached the podium slowly, leaning slightly on my cane, one final performance of weakness. The room quieted. I looked out at the expectant faces, lingering briefly on Isabella's satisfied smile. Thank you, Travis, I began, my voice quiet but steady. You're right that we stand at a threshold, though not the one you described. I pressed the remote in my pocket. Behind me, the presentation screen changed from the company logo to a split screen of surveillance footage. On the left, Travis and Isabella embracing in the hospital corridor. On the right, the timestamp, mere hours after my accident. A murmur rippled through the audience. I had planned to speak about innovation today, I continued, pressing the button again. The screen changed to show technical diagrams of brake lines, before and after tampering. Instead, I find myself addressing something far more fundamental: betrayal. Isabella's face had drained of color. Travis started toward me, but Dominic was faster, stepping into his path. 3 months ago, I was nearly killed when my car's brake lines failed, I said, my voice growing stronger. What appeared to be an accident was, in fact, attempted murder. The next slide displayed banking records, large transfers from Isabella's account to the mechanic who worked on my car. A conspiracy orchestrated by my wife. I gestured to Isabella, who had half risen from her seat, and my business partner. My eyes found Travis, now frozen in place beside Dominic, with the knowledge and support of others. I advanced through the evidence methodically. The encrypted messages between Travis and Isabella spanning years. The forged documents transferring my patents. The diverted company funds. The falsified clinical trials. Finally, I played the audio recording from the hospital. Isabella's voice crystal clear. The accident didn't kill him. We need to move faster. By now, the room had erupted in shocked exclamations. A board member had physically recoiled from Isabella. An investor was shouting questions at Travis. The full technical report confirms that my brake lines were deliberately compromised, I said, gesturing to Sophia, who stepped forward. I'm Sophia Reeves, former military intelligence specialist, she announced. I tracked down the original mechanic who examined Mr. Petrov's vehicle. His initial report, which mysteriously disappeared from official records, clearly indicates sabotage. I have his sworn statement and photographs taken at the scene. Travis finally found his voice. This is absurd. A desperate fabrication by a man who can't accept his own failures. Is it? Victor Crane rose from his seat in the back row, commanding instant attention. I commissioned an independent forensic analysis of Mr. Petrov's vehicle remains. He produced a folder. The findings corroborate everything he's claimed. I caught the calculating gleam in Crane's eye. His support was not altruism but calculation, positioning himself as the hero while advancing his own agenda. Cameras flashed as Larissa moved through the chaos, her phone live streaming every moment to thousands of viewers. Securities fraud. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. The words cut through the commotion as the back doors opened, revealing several serious-faced individuals in suits. I'm Detective Reynolds, Economic Crimes Division. We have some questions. Travis lunged for the side exit but collided with 2 uniformed officers. Isabella rose, her composure shattering as she turned toward the main doors, only to find her path blocked by another detective. "Isabella Ryan Petrov?" he asked, producing a document. "I have a warrant for your arrest." Her eyes found mine across the chaos, wide, shocked, and for the first time since I'd known her, stripped of all pretense. "Nicholas," she whispered. "Please." I turned away, feeling nothing but a cold, clean certainty that justice had finally begun. The next 48 hours unfolded in a blur of police statements, news reports, and frantic calls from investors. I watched from a strange emotional distance as my carefully constructed revenge took on a life of its own. The business news channels ran the story on continuous loop, shaky phone footage of Travis being led away in handcuffs, Isabella's shell-shocked face as detectives read her rights, Patricia's desperate attempts to distance herself from the scandal. The company's stock plummeted 30% in a single day. "They're charging Travis with attempted murder, securities fraud, and document forgery," Dominic reported, pacing my living room while scanning legal documents. "Isabella's charges are less severe initially, just fraud and forgery. The prosecutor wants more evidence before adding attempted murder. She'll make bail," I predicted. "Her family has money. Is that part of your plan?" Sophia asked from her position by the window, where she'd been monitoring the street for reporters or other unwanted visitors. "Everything is part of the plan," I replied. 3 days later, an emergency board meeting was called to address the crisis. The boardroom that had witnessed Travis's downfall now held shell-shocked executives and panicked investors. I entered with quiet confidence, no longer leaning on my cane. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began, "I understand your concerns. The company's reputation has suffered a devastating blow. But I'm here to offer a solution." I outlined how Phoenix Med, my new company, would purchase a controlling interest in the existing corporation, stabilizing its value and ensuring continuity for investors. The technological innovations would proceed under new management, with enhanced oversight and transparency. "Why should we trust you after all this?" demanded one board member. "Your wife and partner nearly destroyed everything." "Because unlike them, I built this company to save lives, not take them," I replied. "And because I've already secured $200 million in new investment capital." On cue, my team of investors entered, respected venture capitalists and medical technology pioneers whose reputations were beyond reproach. Their presence immediately changed the energy in the room. Hope replaced panic. Relief replaced suspicion. Victor Crane arrived fashionably late, making a show of shaking my hand for the cameras. "I believe in Nicholas Petrov and his vision," he announced grandly. "My fund is committing $50 million to ensure Phoenix Med's success." His performance was flawless, the benevolent savior stepping in to rescue a victim of betrayal. Only I noticed how his eyes continuously assessed the room, cataloging weaknesses, measuring influence. Later that day, Alex confirmed my suspicions. "Crane has already placed 3 of his people in your new organizational structure," she reported. "Mid-level positions with access to research data." "Let them look," I replied. "They won't find what they're searching for." A week after her arrest, Isabella made bail. Her family estate, provided as collateral, ensured her temporary freedom while awaiting trial. That evening, my phone displayed a number I hadn't expected to see again. "Nicholas." Isabella's voice was soft, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "We need to talk. Please." "Why would I talk to you?" My voice remained steady despite the storm of emotions her call triggered. "Because you deserve explanations. Because despite everything, we were married for 5 years. Pause. Because if you wanted me completely destroyed, you would have done it already." I agreed to meet her at Bellini's, the restaurant where we had celebrated our first anniversary. An irony she surely understood. She arrived looking nothing like the disheveled woman from the arrest photos. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup subtle but flawless, her dress elegant but conservative, a careful balance between contrition and dignity. "You look well," she said as she sat across from me. "Better than you have in months." "Amazing what freedom from betrayal can do," I replied. She reached for my hand but I withdrew it. Hurt flashed across her face, practiced or genuine, I couldn't tell anymore. "I have a proposal," she said, leaning forward. "I'll testify against Travis. Tell them everything, how he planned it all, how he pressured me into helping." Her eyes glistened with carefully measured tears. "I was afraid of him, Nicholas. More afraid than you know." I studied her face, the face I had once believed contained only truth and love. "And in exchange? Drop the charges against me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Give me a chance to start over. For a moment I allowed myself to remember how it felt to love her. The crushing weight of loss when I discovered her betrayal. The hollow space where trust had lived. I removed a manila envelope from my jacket and slid it across the table. Divorce papers. Already filed. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers, scanning the documents. Nicholas, please. You didn't make a mistake, Isabella, I said, rising from the table. You made a choice. Every day for 3 years you chose to betray me. To plot my death. To steal everything I built. I can explain. You already did. The accident didn't kill him. We need to move faster. Those were your words. I placed cash on the table for my untouched coffee. Goodbye, Isabella. What about forgiveness? She called as I walked away. I paused at the door. You're not seeking forgiveness. You're seeking escape. There's a difference. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters the morning the trial began. Nicholas Petrov, they called, thrusting microphones toward my face. How does it feel facing your would-be killers? Will you testify against your wife? Dominic guided me through the crowd, his hand steady on my shoulder. No comments until after proceedings, he repeated like a mantra. Inside, the courtroom had the hushed reverence of a cathedral, a temple to justice where truth would finally be weighed and measured. Travis and Isabella sat at separate tables with their respective legal teams, neither acknowledging the other. Travis wore an expression of injured innocence, while Isabella had cultivated a fragile vulnerability. Larissa nodded to me from the press section. Her series of articles, Betrayal and Attempted Murder in the Biotech Elite, had turned the case into national news. Her latest piece had uncovered connections between Travis and previous corporate espionage cases that had been quietly settled out of court. The prosecution opened with clinical precision, laying out the conspiracy timeline. When they played the enhanced audio of Isabella's hospital phone call, I watched the jury's expressions shift from professional attention to personal disgust. My testimony came on the third day. I described waking up in the hospital, overhearing Isabella's conversation, discovering the affair and the plot against me. My voice remained steady until I described finding emails about our lost child. They used the most painful moment of our marriage, the miscarriage of our baby, as cover for their affair, I said, my composure finally cracking. While I grieved, they plotted. Several jurors wiped away tears. Even the judge paused proceedings for a moment. Travis's defense strategy emerged the following week, complete denial paired with misdirection. My client was manipulated by a master manipulator, his attorney argued, pointing dramatically at Isabella. Mrs. Petrov seduced and controlled Mr. Carter, feeding him lies about her husband's supposed mistreatment. Isabella's face tightened with genuine anger for the first time. Her attorney requested an immediate conference with the judge. The next day, Isabella's team presented a damning email chain. Travis's voice filled the courtroom from audio recordings. Once he's gone, we'll control everything. The break modification is my idea, untraceable and effective. Travis leaped to his feet. She edited those recordings. This is a setup. Mr. Carter, control yourself, the judge ordered. You don't understand, Travis continued, panic breaking through his polished facade. There are bigger players involved. I'm not the mastermind. His attorney yanked him back into his seat, but the outburst hung in the air like smoke. Sophia's testimony proved particularly devastating. With her military background established, she described finding the original brake inspection report and tracking down the mechanic who had fled after being threatened. The mechanic confirmed that the brake lines had been deliberately compromised, Sophia testified. He provided these photographs and his sworn statement identifying who paid him. The prosecutor displayed a bank statement showing the transfer from Isabella's account to the mechanic, $50,000 for what was labeled consulting services. When the prosecution played recordings of Isabella and Travis discussing the failed attempt and planning their next move, an elderly juror actually gasped aloud. Patricia's testimony came as a surprise to many, though not to me. In exchange for a plea deal on lesser charges, she agreed to testify against her daughter. Isabella told me about the plan after it was already in motion, Patricia said, avoiding her daughter's gaze. I advised her to stop, but she said it was too late, that Travis would expose her if she backed out. A strategic lie to minimize her own involvement, but useful nonetheless. The trial's most unexpected moment came during Travis's cross-examination. The prosecutor had been methodically dismantling his denials when she asked about his financial history. This wasn't your first attempt at corporate theft, was it, Mr. Carter? Travis's attorney objected immediately, but in his haste to interrupt, he blurted, My client's previous settlements have no bearing, before catching himself. The damage was done. By day's end, the FBI announced they were reopening investigations into 3 companies where Travis had previously worked, all of which had experienced unexplained data breaches or intellectual property disputes. Outside the courthouse that evening, Dominic summarized the day's developments. Travis is finished. His own lawyer practically admitted to previous settlements for similar behavior. And Isabella? I asked, watching rain puddles reflect the streetlights. Her strategy of blaming Travis might reduce her sentence, but the financial evidence connecting her directly to the brake tampering is too strong to escape conviction. What about Travis's comment about bigger players? Sophia asked, joining us under the shelter of the courthouse portico. Could be desperation, Dominic suggested. Or misdirection. I wasn't so sure. Victor Crane's involvement still troubled me, his too convenient appearance, his strategic support of my cause. Something about Travis's panic felt genuine. Keep digging, I told them both. This might go deeper than we thought. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Travis Carter, guilty. The foreman's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. I watched Travis's shoulders slump as each subsequent verdict was read: guilty of fraud, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of document forgery. His carefully constructed mask of innocence crumbled, revealing the desperate man beneath. 3 days later, the same jury delivered their verdict for Isabella. Guilty on all counts, though her cooperation had secured the prosecution's recommendation for a reduced sentence. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Judge Harmon looked down at Travis with undisguised contempt. Mr. Carter, you have demonstrated a pattern of calculated evil rarely seen in this courtroom. You plotted the death of your business partner for financial gain, corrupted scientific research that could have saved countless lives, and showed no remorse throughout these proceedings. Travis stared at the floor, his expensive suit now hanging loosely on his frame after weeks in custody. I sentence you to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 10 years, and restitution of $30 million. When Isabella stood for her sentencing, she had transformed herself again. Hair pulled back simply, minimal makeup, wearing a conservative navy dress that suggested penitence. Mrs. Petrov, your cooperation with authorities has been noted. However, your willingness to plot the murder of your husband, a man who by all accounts treated you with love and respect, speaks to a profound moral corruption. Isabella nodded slightly, eyes downcast. 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 7, and restitution of $15 million. Patricia, having pleaded guilty to lesser charges of conspiracy and obstruction, received 5 years probation and 2,000 hours of community service. The sight of my once imperious mother-in-law humbled by justice brought me no satisfaction, only a hollow confirmation that greed corrupts across generations. 3 months after the sentencing, I visited the women's correctional facility where Isabella was serving her term. I'm not sure what drove me there, closure perhaps, or some need to witness the consequences of her actions with my own eyes. The woman who entered the visitation room bore little resemblance to the elegant socialite I had married. Prison-issued clothing hung on her thinner frame. Without designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked smaller, ordinary. I didn't expect to see you, she said, sitting across from me at the metal table. Neither did I admitted. We sat in silence for a moment, the gulf between us filled with unspoken words and irreversible choices. The appeals court denied my motion, she finally said. In case you were wondering. I nodded. I know. Is there? She hesitated, a flash of the old Isabella's calculation crossing her face before vanishing again. Is there any chance you could ever forgive me? I studied her face, once so beloved, now as familiar as a stranger's. Forgiveness doesn't restore trust, Isabella. Some things once broken stay broken. Outside, rain fell in sheets, washing the prison yard into blurred grays and browns. A fitting backdrop for the closing of this chapter. Meanwhile, Phoenix Med flourished. Our new treatment protocol completed clinical trials with unprecedented success rates. Hospitals across the country implemented our technology, and preliminary data showed a 40% improvement in patient outcomes. With the company secure, I established the New Beginning Foundation, providing support for victims of fraud and domestic betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own trauma transformed into a vehicle for healing others. Sophia transitioned from consultant to full-time security director at Phoenix Med. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into something more personal. Coffee meetings became dinner conversations. Late-night strategy sessions occasionally ended with her hand in mine as we discussed more than just business. "You deserve happiness, Nicholas," she told me one evening as we walked along the riverfront. "Not just success." For the first time since the accident, I felt the possibility of a future unburdened by betrayal. But beneath this new beginning, troubling patterns emerged. Security logs showed unusual access attempts to our research servers. Key employees received recruitment offers from competitors at suspiciously similar intervals. Most concerning was Victor Crane's continued involvement. His initial investment had opened doors for Phoenix Med, but his influence expanded in subtle ways. Board meetings increasingly reflected his priorities. International expansion, particularly into European markets, accelerated under his guidance. "Something's not right," I told Dominic during a secure meeting in my home office. "Crane is pushing too hard for the German and Swiss licensing deals." Dominic nodded, sliding a folder across my desk. "My investigator found this. Crane has been quietly acquiring shares in 3 pharmaceutical companies that would directly compete with our technology. Why support us publicly while undermining us privately?" I wondered. "Classic corporate raider strategy," Dominic replied. "Get inside, learn the vulnerabilities, then either control or destroy." That night, I received an encrypted message from Alex. "Security breach detected. Unknown entity attempted access to clinical trial data. Sophisticated attack. Not amateurs." The peace I had fought so hard to achieve was beginning to fracture. Victory over Travis and Isabella had been merely the first battle in a larger war, one whose true enemy remained in the shadows. 2 years passed. Phoenix Med grew from promising startup to industry leader, our medical protocols implemented in hospitals across 3 continents. The betrayal that had nearly killed me receded into memory, a scar that had healed, though it sometimes still ached before rain. I was reviewing plans for our new research facility when Sophia entered my office, her expression tense. "This came for you," she said, placing a manila envelope on my desk. No return address. It bypassed mail screening somehow. Inside was a single photograph of our headquarters with a red X drawn across it. The attached note read simply, "Everything you've built can still burn." "Security breach?" I asked. "I'm already on it," Sophia replied. "Full sweep of all systems and personnel." By evening, her findings painted a disturbing picture. 3 employees, all recommended by Crane, have been downloading research data. Not everything at once, but systematic collection over months. She showed me the access logs. Small enough to avoid automatic alerts, but comprehensive when combined. I stared at the evidence, cold anger building. What's Crane's endgame? "We might never know," Sophia said, placing a tablet before me. "Travis Carter died yesterday in prison. Official cause, heart attack. The news article described it as natural causes. A man in his 50s with high stress and poor prison diet. But the timing felt too convenient." "There's more," Sophia continued. "Before he died, Travis sent this to his attorney. The message was brief and encrypted. Tell Petrov to beware the man behind the curtain. He orchestrated everything. I was just a pawn." 2 days later, I received a request for a prison call from Isabella. Against Dominic's advice, I accepted. "Nicholas," her voice sounded different, harder, stripped of pretense. "Travis is dead." "I know. It wasn't natural causes." Her words came quickly as if she feared being cut off. "There's someone else involved. Someone Travis called the architect. He mentioned this person only once to me when he was drunk and scared." "Why should I believe anything you say?" I asked. "Because I'm still serving 12 more years because of this person. Travis was more afraid of the architect than prison. That's why he never mentioned him during the trial." The call ended abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers. "It could be manipulation," Dominic cautioned when I relayed the conversation. "She's desperate, serving a long sentence." But Sophia wasn't so quick to dismiss it. She launched her own investigation, leveraging contacts from her military intelligence days. A week later, she placed a file on my desk marked classified. "The architect exists," she said. "I found communications between Travis and a senior health ministry official that date back 5 years. They used a proprietary encryption that suggests government resources." "A government official involved in corporate sabotage?" I asked incredulously. "Not directly. He appears to be working through proxies, one of whom matches Victor Crane's profile." Further investigation confirmed our suspicions. Crane's pharmaceutical investments all centered around treatments that would become obsolete if our protocol succeeded. The real target had never been my company, it was the medical innovation itself. Your treatment protocol threatens billions in pharmaceutical profits, Dominic explained. By reducing hospital stays and medication dependence by 40%, you're disrupting entire business models. Sophia discovered encrypted communications between Crane and several offshore entities, all using similar cryptographic signatures to those found in Travis's old messages. They're planning something, she warned. The threats, the data theft, it's building toward something bigger. The final piece fell into place when Isabella managed to send a message through her attorney, check the original patent applications. There's a hidden flaw they're going to exploit. Buried in the technical documentation was a vulnerability, one that existed only in the earliest versions of the protocol but could be weaponized to discredit the entire approach if presented selectively. They'll use this to claim the treatment is dangerous, I realized. Trigger a massive recall and investigation. Which Crane's companies would be perfectly positioned to exploit, Dominic added. That night, in a secure room swept for surveillance, we formulated our counterattack. If the architect wanted our data, we would give it to him, but not the data he expected. We'll create a vulnerability, I explained, sketching the plan. A deliberate gap in our security that contains selected research files. Make it look like a disgruntled employee copied critical data. A trap, Sophia nodded. But we'll need bait valuable enough to force the architect into the open. The newest treatment algorithm, I decided. The one we haven't announced yet. Dominic looked concerned. That's your most valuable intellectual property. Exactly. Too valuable for the architect to ignore. I looked between my closest allies. But what he'll get is a modified version. One that works perfectly in initial testing but fails catastrophically under specific conditions. Conditions you control, Sophia said, understanding dawning. Precisely. If they try to use it, we'll know exactly who they are. I closed my notebook. It's time to meet the man behind the curtain. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. A flash drive with falsified security clearance left conspicuously in a desk drawer. Surveillance cameras, accidentally, disabled for 30 minutes during system maintenance. An encrypted folder labeled Protocol Alpha Final, with security just formidable enough to appear legitimate without being impenetrable. 2 days later, the bait was taken. Our monitoring system registered an attempt to access the data from an anonymous proxy server. They've got it, Sophia confirmed, watching the digital breadcrumbs we'd embedded in the files activate. Accessing from multiple locations now, running simulations. The modified algorithm worked exactly as designed, flawlessly in standard testing environments but programmed to fail catastrophically under specific conditions that would appear only when implemented at scale. We didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, a financial intermediary approached Dominic, offering to purchase the failing company at 30 cents on the dollar. The offer came through 7 shell companies, Dominic reported, but all traced back to Crane Holdings. We accepted the meeting but insisted on Crane's personal presence. My client will only negotiate with principals, not intermediaries, Dominic informed them coolly. The confrontation took place in the neutral territory of a private dining room at the Montclair Hotel. Crane arrived with 2 bodyguards and a smug confidence that faltered slightly when he saw the FBI agents positioned discreetly around the perimeter. An impressive security detail, Nicholas, he commented, taking his seat. Are you expecting trouble? Just ensuring privacy for our conversation, I replied. About the architect, and his role in attempting to kill me. Crane's expression didn't change, but his left hand twitched slightly. I have no idea what you're talking about. I slid a tablet across the table displaying the corrupted algorithm. Your people took the bait. An algorithm designed to fail, but only after being tested and approved. Imagine the scandal when treatments failed and patients died. Phoenix Med would be destroyed overnight. A fascinating theory, Crane replied, but entirely unfounded. Sophia placed a recording device on the table. This conversation is being broadcast to the FBI Cybercrime Division. We have evidence linking you to Travis Carter dating back 5 years. We know you orchestrated the entire plot. Crane's composure finally cracked. You understand nothing, Petrov. Your technology threatens an industry worth hundreds of billions. I supported you publicly to assess the threat while preparing to neutralize it. By trying to kill me? Crane actually laughed. That was Travis's idea. Crude but expedient. I merely provided resources and suggested he involve your wife. Her greed made her the perfect accomplice. You manipulated them both. They were already corrupt. I simply provided direction. Crane leaned forward. Carter was eliminated because he became a liability. He would have eventually implicated me. And now you've implicated yourself, I said as FBI agents entered the room. This entire conversation has been recorded under federal warrant. The case against Crane became the corporate scandal of the decade. His confession, combined with evidence gathered by federal investigators, revealed a conspiracy spanning multiple pharmaceutical companies. Travis had been murdered in prison on Crane's orders when he became a potential witness. The heart attack had been induced by a toxin administered by a corrupted prison guard. 5 years later, I stood outside a rehabilitation center watching patients in the garden. Isabella worked among them, her prison sentence reduced after her crucial testimony against Crane. Her face had aged, but there was something different in her eyes, a humility that prison and confronting her own capacity for evil had carved into her. She spotted me at the fence and approached cautiously. "Nicholas," she said simply. "I didn't expect to see you." "I'm closing accounts," I replied. "Making peace with the past." She nodded, understanding. I deserved everything that happened to me. Sometimes the most important lesson comes from losing everything. "Are you finding redemption here?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Not redemption. Purpose maybe." She gestured to the patients. "Working with people who've lost everything through mistakes and crimes, it helps." We spoke briefly about her work, about Crane's 20-year sentence, about the foundations Phoenix Med had established for victims of corporate fraud. There was no rekindling, no forgiveness really, just acknowledgement of a shared history now closed. Sophia waited in the car, her pregnant belly just beginning to show beneath her blouse. She squeezed my hand as I slid into the driver's seat. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Lighter," I admitted. Like I finally put down something heavy I didn't realize I was still carrying. As we drove toward our new home, I reflected on how different victory looked from what I had first imagined. The true triumph wasn't destroying my enemies, it was building something they couldn't destroy. We arrived to find our front yard filled with friends and colleagues gathered to celebrate Phoenix Med's 5th anniversary and the launch of our International Children's Medicine Initiative. Among the crowd, Dominic raised a glass in greeting, and Larissa waved from beside her photographer. Later that evening, as conversations flowed around us, I held the ultrasound image of our daughter, tracing the tiny profile with my finger. Here was the real rebirth, not from ashes of revenge, but from the quiet courage to begin again after betrayal. Sophia leaned against my shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "That some things once broken stay broken," I said, remembering my words to Isabella years before. "But sometimes what you build afterward is stronger than what was lost."